John had always been fascinated by the idea of unseen worlds. While others were drawn to the noise of crowded streets or the comfort of routine, John's curiosity pulled him toward the edges of reality, to places where the ordinary slipped into the extraordinary. He was not a man of great fortune or power, but he possessed something more valuable, an unshakable desire to uncover truth. For years, he had read forgotten books, studied old maps, and listened to stories whispered in half-lit taverns. Most people dismissed these tales as fantasy. John, however, felt certain that they contained fragments of reality, pieces of a puzzle that only needed the right mind to assemble. One autumn evening, with the moon hanging low and pale in the sky, John left his small apartment and walked through the narrow, silent streets of the old city. The air was heavy with mist, and every step echoed softly against the cobblestones. In his hand, he carried a worn leather notebook, its pages filled with sketches, codes, and notes gathered over the past decade. Tonight, he believed, something was about to change. The old clock tower struck midnight as John entered a forgotten alley. Few dared to walk here after dark. The place had a reputation for shadows that lingered too long and whispers that did not belong to the wind. John felt the chill but pressed forward. His instincts told him he was close, closer than ever before. At the end of the alley stood an iron gate, rusted with age, yet strangely untouched by time. John paused, his heart beating faster, and reached into his pocket to pull out a small brass key he had purchased years ago from an antique shop. The shopkeeper, an old man with glassy eyes, had warned him, "This key opens more than a door. It opens choices. Some you may regret." With a deep breath, John slid the key into the lock. To his surprise, the gate opened silently, without resistance, as if it had been waiting for him all these years. Beyond it lay a garden, overgrown and wild, bathed in silvery moonlight. The air smelled of damp earth and forgotten secrets. As he stepped inside, John felt the weight of the world shift. The night grew strangely quiet, as though the city outside had vanished. The garden seemed alive, every leaf trembling as though it were watching him. At the center stood a stone fountain, cracked and dry, yet humming faintly with an energy he could feel in his bones. He approached carefully. His hand brushed against the stone, and suddenly, the humming grew louder, vibrating through his body. The notebook slipped from his fingers and fell open on the ground. To his astonishment, the fountain's carvings matched sketches he had drawn years earlier, symbols he thought were nothing more than imagination. John's breath caught in his chest. This was it. The beginning, he whispered to himself. I found it, at last. But even as excitement surged within him, a quiet dread settled in his heart. For if this place was real, then so too were the dangers that came with it. The unseen world was no longer a dream. It was waiting, watching, ready to pull him in. And John, without hesitation, stepped closer. As the days turned into weeks, John's mind kept drifting back to that night. The dream he had experienced was unlike anything else in his life. He remembered the vivid landscapes, the strange voices, and the powerful feeling that stayed with him even after waking up. At first, John tried to dismiss it. He told himself it was nothing more than a trick of the mind, a simple dream created by stress and lack of sleep. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. Every night when he closed his eyes, fragments of the dream returned, sometimes clearer, sometimes more mysterious. One evening, unable to resist the pull any longer, John sat down at his desk with a notebook. He began writing everything he remembered about the dream. The golden sky, the enormous trees that seemed to whisper secrets, the figure in the distance calling his name. Page after page, he filled his notebook, trying desperately to capture the details before they slipped away. The more he wrote, the more he realized something strange. These weren't just random images. The dream followed a pattern, like a hidden story waiting to be revealed. And at the heart of it all was the mysterious voice that had called out to him. A voice that sounded oddly familiar, yet distant, like an echo from another world. John became obsessed. He stopped spending time with friends, stopped watching TV, and spent his evenings searching for answers. He read about dream interpretation, ancient myths, and spiritual journeys. The more he studied, the more convinced he became. This dream was not just a dream, it was a message. One night, John made a decision. He would not run from it anymore. He prepared his room carefully, closing the curtains, dimming the lights, and sitting quietly in the dark. Then he whispered to himself, "If this dream is calling me, then I'm ready. Show me the truth." As he drifted into sleep, his heart raced with anticipation. And when the dream returned, it was stronger than ever. The same golden light surrounded him, but this time he felt himself being pulled forward, deeper into the unknown. He walked past the giant trees, past the glowing river, and toward the shadowy figure that had been waiting for him. The figure stepped closer. John's breath caught in his throat. It was not a stranger, it was someone he thought he had lost long ago. John could hardly believe his eyes. Standing before him was his younger brother, Daniel, who had passed away years ago in a tragic accident. John's chest tightened, his voice trembled as he whispered, "Daniel, is it really you?" The figure smiled gently. "Yes, brother. It's me. I've been waiting for you." Tears welled in John's eyes. He wanted to run forward and embrace him, but something held him back. The air between them shimmered with a strange, golden energy, as if the dream itself was alive. "Why are you here?" John asked. "Why am I seeing you after all this time?" Daniel's expression grew serious. "This place is not just a dream. It is a passage, a door between worlds. You were chosen to enter it, because your heart is searching for answers." John felt chills run down his spine. He remembered all the nights he spent wondering about life, death, and the mysteries beyond. Could it be that this dream was the universe responding to his questions? Daniel continued, his voice echoing softly through the glowing forest. "You cannot stay here forever, but you can learn from this place. There are secrets buried in your own soul, truths you must uncover before it's too late." John's hand shook. "What do you mean, too late?" Daniel raised his hand, pointing toward the horizon. The golden sky darkened slightly, and in the distance, John saw shadows rising, vast, shapeless forms moving slowly across the dreamscape. "They are coming," Daniel said firmly. "They feed on fear, confusion, and doubt. If you do not understand your path, they will consume you." John swallowed hard. The shadows pulsed with an energy that made his stomach twist. For the first time, he felt genuine fear inside the dream. His voice cracked. "What do I have to do?" Daniel looked directly into his eyes. "Face your past. Accept the pain you've been hiding. Only then can you walk forward without fear." John lowered his gaze, memories flooding back, his brother's accident, the guilt he had carried for years, the belief that it had somehow been his fault. The dream was no longer just strange or mysterious, it was personal. And for the first time, John realized something powerful. This dream was not about escaping reality. It was about confronting it. John stood in the golden half-light, trying to hold his brother's gaze without drowning in the tide of memories rising behind his eyes. He had told himself the past was a closed door, nailed shut, buried under new routines and ordinary days. But here, in this lucid hush between worlds, the door swung open without a sound. "Daniel," he said, steadying his breath, "if this place is a passage, why does it hurt like a wound that never closes?" "Because you never let it," Daniel answered softly. "You packed the pain in a box and labeled it later. But later never came. The box grew heavier. You just learned to carry it." John wanted to argue. He wanted to say he had moved on, new job, new city, the tidy apartment with the plant that never quite died. But moving on is not the same as moving through. He felt that truth like a splinter beneath the skin. The forest listened. Leaves trembled as if eavesdropping on confession. The river nearby murmured with the patience of old stone, and somewhere in the distance a bell tolled, a single note that didn't belong to any clock John knew. "I keep replaying it," John admitted. "The day of the accident. I was the one who asked you to come with me. If I hadn't," Daniel lifted a hand, not to silence him but to share the burden of that sentence. "You asked. I chose. Fate is not a rope dragged by one set of hands. But I should have seen the road, the oil on the curve. You were not the weather," Daniel said. "You were my brother." John closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, the world stuttered through frames, the flash of headlights, the scream of torn metal, the color of sirens on wet asphalt. He tasted the iron of blood, the salt of rain, the numbness afterward when people spoke like radios slightly off tune. "Guilt," Daniel said, "is a map that never leads home. You can wander it for years and never arrive. The shadows on the horizon rustled like a city waking. John felt their presence again, those vast, shape-shifting forms that fed on fear and confusion. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They fattened on delay. What do they want from me? John asked. Nothing you haven't already given. Daniel replied. Your attention. Your doubt. Your tomorrow. A wind moved through the trees, and in its wake, a scatter of pale seeds spun downward, each one bright as a fallen star. When they touched the ground, the soil glowed faintly, marking a path that curved toward the river and beyond. The dream itself seemed to be laying stones beneath John's feet to walk, Daniel said, but not to run away. Walk to meet what you keep refusing. John picked up his old leather notebook, the one filled with sketches and codes, and tucked it inside his coat. He took the first step. The ground answered with a tone he felt in his bones. I'm not ready, he said. No one is, Daniel smiled. We begin anyway. The path opened into a clearing where a building stood that John had never seen and yet somehow recognized. It was a house assembled from echoes, a front porch from the first place they had lived as brothers, a kitchen window from their grandmother's farm, a hallway lifted straight from the hospital where time had once fractured into before and after. The roof was patched with pages of old calendars, the doorframe smelled like winter coats and the inside of a violin case. This is impossible, John whispered. It's memory, Daniel said. Memory is the most honest architect if you let it build. John reached for the handle. It was warm, as if a hand had just left it. When he stepped inside, the air rearranged itself around his breathing. The living room flickered with scenes that did not compete, they braided. A couch where they had argued about nothing and everything. The carpet where they built a city of wooden blocks and then destroyed it with dinosaur feet. A clock that kept perfect time and also none at all. On the mantel, a photograph, two boys at a lake, all knees and grins, the world still unbreaking. John lifted it, the glass didn't reflect his face so much as multiply it. Child, teenager, man, layered like transparency sheets in a classroom projector. What am I supposed to do here? John asked. Tell the truth out loud, said Daniel. So he tried. I loved you, John said to the house, to his brother, to the page of his life that had been dogged by grief. I loved you, and I failed you, and I didn't, both at once. I want the past to be a door I can lock from this side, but it swings. It always swings. The house received the words without judgment. The wallpaper breathed. From the kitchen came the smell of burnt toast and apology. A staircase rose where there had been none, each step labeled in small, neat handwriting: regret, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and then steps with no labels at all. John climbed. With each rise his chest loosened, not by magic but by friction, the soul sanding down a rough truth until it fit inside a human day. At the top landing, a hallway of closed doors awaited. He chose the one painted the color of rain. Inside, a hospital room. Machines hummed like distant beehives. The window was night, and the linoleum floor remembered 1,000 footsteps that did not know where to go. There, on the bed, a shape that was Daniel and not Daniel, a room where love struggled to locate a body. John went to the bedside and did the one thing he had not permitted himself to do in all the years since. He cried without defending the tears. Not the tidy tears of polite grief, but the ancient kind that has traveled through families and cities and wars and still knows how to speak when it passed. He was emptied but not hollow. A kind of quiet arrived that did not erase the pain, it placed it. The difference was everything. Daniel stood in the doorway, alive again in this place that folded time like paper. You're closer, he said. To what? To carrying me without breaking yourself. They left the house of echoes and returned to the path, which now led down to the river. The water glowed with a soft interior light, as if lit by the moon beneath instead of above. On the opposite bank, the shadows had gathered. They did not howl or threaten, they merely existed, patient as hunger. What keeps them fed? John asked. Your refusal to choose, Daniel said. When you stop, they feast. When you move, they starve. John stepped to the water's edge. Shapes formed in the current, memories he had avoided because they were not tragic enough to justify their own weight. The phone call he never returned, the job application he never submitted, the friendship that died not with a bang but with an unsent text. The river did not accuse. It revealed, I want something simple. John said. A rule, a spell, a map. Daniel crouched and drew a circle in the sand with his finger. There are only 3 questions worth asking when you are lost, he said. What am I afraid of? What am I pretending not to know? What small step honors the truth I already have? John studied the circle. The questions were unadorned enough to be dangerous. I am afraid, he said carefully, that if I stop carrying guilt, I will stop carrying you. Daniel shook his head. Guilt is not a memorial. It is a prison with your face painted on the wall. Step out. I'll still be here. I have always been here, in your kindness, in your stubbornness, in every time you made a stranger feel less alone. John's throat tightened. He said nothing for a long while. The river went on being the river. Finally, he took a small stone from the shore, whispered something into it that no one else would ever hear, and threw it across the water. It skipped once, twice, then sank with a sound like a secret being folded shut. The shadows dimmed. He felt it, an almost imperceptible lightening in the air, as if someone had opened a window in a room he didn't know was stuffy. What now? He asked. Now we keep walking, Daniel replied. There's one place left. They climbed a gentle hill until the trees arranged themselves into an orchard, rows of branches woven into archways, fruit hanging low enough to bless a passing forehead. The sky here was neither gold nor night. It was the color of breath on a winter morning. At the orchard's heart stood a table set for 2, no feast, just bread still warm and a knife that reflected only the future. A small book lay beside the plates, bound in rough cloth, its title pressed in faint letters. After Daniel gestured for John to sit. This is where we promise. I don't make promises I can't keep, John said. Then only make the ones you can, Daniel answered. As if it were the simplest thing in the world, John opened the little book. The pages were blank except for the first line, which waited for his handwriting. Today I will honor the living by refusing to worship my wounds. He stared at the sentence. It did not ask him to forget. It asked him to stop building altars to what hurt. Another line appeared, as if coaxed out of the paper by courage. I will let love be heavy without letting it be a chain. He picked up the knife and cut the bread. Steam spiraled up like a ghost deciding to be kind. They ate without hurry. When they were finished, Daniel placed his palm against John's chest, right over the ribs that had always felt slightly too tight. Listen, he said. At first, John heard nothing but the ordinary thud of a human heart. Then he noticed a second rhythm braided through the first, the cadence of 2 boys running by a lake, the clap of hands when a joke lands, the quiet metronome of shared rooms and shared years. It was a heartbeat that had learned to be plural. Tears found him again, but this time they were light, like rain that knows the garden will greet it with gratitude. Will I lose you when I wake up? He asked. You only ever lose what you refuse to carry differently, Daniel said. Take me as a compass, not a weight. The shadows on the far bank, finally and fed, thin to the texture of rumor and then to nothing at all. The orchard brightened, not by the arrival of sun but by the absence of fear. John closed the book. The title glowed for a moment after, and then settled into the ordinary magic of a thing that will still be on the table tomorrow. Time to go, he asked. For now, Daniel replied. There are other doors, but this one will stay open. They walked back toward the path where the first seeds had fallen like stars. As they reached the gate, John turned. Thank you, he said, not as an apology but as an oath. Live well, Daniel answered. That is the only thanks I need. When John stepped through, the garden did not vanish. It rearranged itself into morning, alarm clock, kettle, the city shy beginning. He stood in his small kitchen, hand on the counter, heartbeat steady, the world unchanged and completely different. He opened his notebook. On a fresh page he wrote, in his neatest letters, the 3 questions from the river. He underlined them twice. Then, beneath them, one more sentence for the day ahead. I will not forfeit tomorrow to the ghosts of yesterday. He closed the notebook, exhaled, and, at last, began. John's first breakthrough came in the simplest form, a small project nobody else wanted to do. It paid little, but John treated it as if it were the most important job in the world. His discipline and passion surprised everyone around him. He worked long hours, often sacrificing sleep, but he delivered results beyond expectations. That single effort opened doors to new opportunities. People began to recognize him not just as a dreamer, but as a doer. With every task completed, John's reputation grew. He was no longer the boy struggling to survive in the city, he was becoming a man shaping his own destiny. Though the journey ahead was still long and filled with challenges, John had finally discovered a truth: success is not given, it is earned, built day by day, with sweat, sacrifice, and persistence. The trial of Joan of Arc reached its tragic climax in May 1431. Despite her courage, the court was determined to silence her forever. Joan was accused of heresy and witchcraft, crimes that carried the most severe of punishments. On the morning of May 30th, 1431, Joan was led to the marketplace in Rouen, where a large wooden stake had been prepared. Thousands gathered to witness the execution of the young woman who had once shaken empires. Dressed in a simple white robe, Joan walked calmly, clutching a wooden cross. As the flames were lit, she cried out with unwavering faith, "Jesus! Jesus!" Her voice echoed through the crowd until it was silenced by smoke and fire. She was just 19 years old. Her ashes were thrown into the river Seine, as if to erase every trace of her existence. Yet, instead of erasing her, her death transformed her into a legend. Soldiers and civilians alike wept, realizing that they had witnessed the death of someone extraordinary. Over the years, Joan's reputation grew stronger. She became a symbol of courage, faith, and national pride for France. Nearly 25 years later, the Catholic Church declared her trial unjust, clearing her name of all charges. Centuries afterward, in 1920, Joan of Arc was canonized as a saint, forever remembered as a martyr. From a humble peasant girl to the savior of France, her life story remains one of the most powerful tales in history. Joan's fire may have been extinguished in Rouen, but her spirit continues to inspire the world. This was the incredible journey of Joan of Arc, brought to you by BioGraphy Pro.